Hello and welcome to the second episode of the URC Fanview series, a fan-led series recapping the season gone by for each of the four Irish provinces. Our focus tonight turns to Connacht, who bowed out of the semi-final stage at the hands of the Stormers. With it, the curtains close on the Andy Friend era, as Connacht seemed to be in better shape from top to bottom than ever before. With me to look back on the rip-roaring season gone by are two Connacht fans and podcasters. Firstly, I'm joined by the host of the Master of None podcast, Stephen Murphy. Welcome aboard, Stephen. Great to have you on.
Thank you very much, Kellen. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. And my second guest is a knowledgeable insider and analyst of Connacht. He goes by the second row, aka Pádraig Kelly. Welcome to the pod, Pádraig.
Thanks, Caelan. And that'll be the first time anyone's called me knowledgeable in a long time. So thanks very much.
I also didn't get that in my intro. So what is that's a dig? That's obviously a dig at me. So I'm obviously not knowledgeable.
I've just been doing this longer. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm not starting that intro all over again. Next time you're on, Stephen, I would just lay it on thick. It's just
appreciate it.
On. Well, first and foremost, lads, there's only one place that we can really start, and that is with Andy Friend. I wouldn't go as far as to say we should just give them the freedom of Galway once they return to South Africa. If they have returned, I'm not 100% sure. But he's just done so much good work. And like the rugby phrase, even though it's off field, is some of it is unseen work during his spell. So just to kick things off, do you want to take us through what he means to Connacht and the legacy he's left? We'll start with yourself, Stephen.
Yeah, there's kind of a few ways to look at it. Obviously, anyone who's actually had any dealings with him in person, we were lucky enough to have him on the podcast, and he very graciously came on the podcast. It wasn't tough to get him on or anything like that, and he's just a really nice, as he would call himself, a bloke, just a really nice lad, really nice guy, very, very generous with his time, very knowledgeable, and a lot of lads, sometimes really knowledgeable people like Pádraig, unlike myself, can make you sometimes feel a bit stupid when they're really knowledgeable on a subject, but Andy won't do that. He will make you feel like almost like you know more than him sometimes, which is not the case. And just, really, really personable, really, really nice. His wife, Kerry, they totally bought into to Connacht, to Galway, to rugby itself here. They've been here for 5 years. That's not a short holiday by any means, especially during COVID when they didn't get home for God knows how long. When they did get home, you have to sit in a hotel for, I can't remember what it was at the time, 2-3 weeks, maybe 4
weeks, I think. Yeah, he did an article about it before, I think.
Yeah, so by no means an easy time to be here, taking over from the Kieran Keane era, which was all kind of negative. And coming in wasn't, I remember at the time people were kind of questioning the appointment just because of his sevens kind of experience rather than his 15s, but it just came in, and since then has had, a lot of tough things to navigate. Not the best budget in the world. I love his phrase when they go for transfers, they go to the basement bargain section.
And they've not Brown Thomas, I think he said before.
No, not Brown Thomas.
Aldi, not Brown Thomas.
Yeah, Aldi, not Brian Thomas. So, but like in Aldi, you can get some great stuff, and we've gotten some great stuff. We've got the likes of Mark Hansen, and we've got the likes of John Porch. These guys who've come in and been absolute rock stars, hit the ground running. And as you said before, he's left Connacht in a much better place than when he left, and that's all you can really. It's all you can really do, bar winning silverware. But look, we have to be realistic with Connacht. That's not the easiest thing to do. Especially in the URC now when you're in the Shield with the other Irish teams. But you can't speak highly enough of the man himself, the job he's done, even having that foresight to let Pete Wilkins kind of come in and start to take over towards this year, him kind of taking a back seat. It would have been easy for him to just be like, okay, that's me done at the end of this year. I don't really care what happens from here on out. But you can clearly see he cares enough that he let kind of Pete Wilkins get into that driver's seat a little bit earlier to get comfortable with the role. And to nurture him into that role, and we're already kind of seeing the benefits of that towards the end of the season. We personally couldn't wish him kind of the best of luck for the rest of his kind of his next adventure, and him and his family, and hopefully I know they're going to go traveling around Ireland for a few months, I think, in the camper van before they go to they're going to go to the World Cup, and then I'm sure go maybe back home to Australia with the family. I know he became a grandfather this year as well, so just can't speak high enough of the man.
All right, do you want to jump in there as well? Because I don't know if people have seen it, and I might even throw it into the program notes if I remember. But you wrote a brilliant article about Andy Friend during the week, so do you want to jump in? And I don't expect you to have learnt it off and to read it all out, but if you want to jump in and give your own thoughts on what we can probably say is a Connacht legend.
Yeah, like I think what Andy brought to Connacht was kind of almost a grounding of what Connacht is. He came in with this attitude that just encapsulated what it means to be someone in Connacht. You've got to buy into the area, you've got to buy into the people, and you've got to buy into the fact that you're not going to be on the same playing field as everyone else, and you just got to get on with it. Like he brought this affable personality. The ability to make you feel seen is an incredible skill. And he brought rugby back to the clubs again. Like my nephew has seen Bundy Aki and Jack Carty more times in person than I have, and he's in the Gaeltacht, and that was not a big club a couple of years ago.
Is that why you're saying apart?
Yes. Yes, of course I am. But like,
they're nice lads.
Yeah, but the fact is that these guys are getting out to the clubs again. They're getting out and about, and I think that was a big part of Andy, especially post-COVID. We realized, hold on a second, this connection is important. He remembered that importance, and that was kind of gone in that year between Pat and him taking over. What he's done off the pitch is bring people along with him. What he's done on the pitch is make sure that there's competition. People have come in and go, well, he's not better than the person who's there before, but he's equally as good. And there's guys coming in now that you can actually say they should be starting the whole way through. There's no fodder really in our squad, and he's made sure that that's a thing. It's hard to actually put into words. It was hard to even write the article together because could have wrote like 50 pages, but you have to kind of just trim it down and just, he was a great guy. He did great work, and going forward, I think we will be able to push on with our lesser budget because of what he's done so far.
Yeah, no, and that's, listen, as you said, like, he's left Connacht in a better place, and that's all you can ask for. And we'll talk about coaching and at the very end, moving on to next season with what some people have said is the all beard and all bald club, which not a bad club. But we'll start looking back on the season now, and we'll go in chronological order, which we always do on this. And I shared a graphic to you of Connacht's season as a chart, which, as we know, they got off to a shaky start, losing their first three before they eventually steadied their ship. So my own URC Fanview pre-season preview article series, a lot of people did say it was a tough start. They couldn't let it get to them. It was not going to be about results, especially when you go to South Africa and you go to Ravenhill. It's not all about results, it's about putting performances together. So I'll turn this one to you, Stephen. Was the optimism dwindling for you in those early performances, or had you faith to just turn it around with, home games coming up and a nice back end to the season?
I mean, logically, yes, we did have faith, just because we were kept being told by coaching staff and players, in media and whatnot, that they were close to getting things, everything was close to clicking. But personally, yeah, I won't lie and say my optimism was dwindling. Look, it was an incredibly tough start to the campaign, as you kind of mentioned. Like, the first 5 games, they played the 4 semi-finalists. I think the other team that wasn't a semi-finalist was Munster. So you were like an absolute gauntlet to start the season. That was tough. What I didn't love, even with the losses, I'm okay with losses if the performance is there. The performances weren't there in those first few games. It was kind of the classic Connacht, kind of 1 step forward, 2 steps back in a lot of areas on the pitch, and that was what was frustrating, because look, you're not going to beat some of these teams. That's just the reality of it. But if you give a good showing of yourself, like last weekend against the Stormers, we didn't play terribly, and I can live with that when you're beaten by a better team. Same the week before with Glasgow. You can, or the week, 2 weeks before with Glasgow. So that was where I was starting to lose optimism as well. Personally, again, and this is more of a personal thing, I didn't really sense that there was like anger within the club that the performances weren't there, and that was my mistake, because that's obviously not the kind of culture that the likes of Andy Friend and Pete Wilkins has there in the club. And they trusted the process. They trusted that, hey, we are going to turn this around. And we saw that in terms of results, in terms of consistency. And Connacht went from what we loved as well. Connacht were beating the teams that we expected Connacht to beat, the teams that were below us in the table, and that hasn't always been the case. You'd beat you'd beat Leinster in the RDS, and then you'd go and lose to the Dragons at home, and that was the sort of performances that would just kill any momentum and kill the belief in the team, because you're like, how can you be so good on one day and then just kind of lay an egg the next day? And that's what kind of frustrated a lot of Connacht fans. But this year we kind of didn't really see that. We saw, beating the teams you should be beating, and giving a proper good go to the teams that maybe are above you in terms of talent and funding and whatnot. So yeah, did my optimism dwindle? I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But we also knew that it was a really tough start to the year, and if you could get to January and February still in the hunt, there was a chance of going on a run. And in fairness to the lads, they absolutely did that.
Or do you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, it was just a really odd season. Like, before the season began, you see the pitch isn't there. Like, the guys aren't even training on the pitch they're going to be playing in at home, for the guts of the season. I remember hearing that the 4G that came in, they built it in like a couple of mil too high, so it was affecting people's kicking. It's all this type of stuff. So it's those type of things that they still had to adjust as the season went on. And every single person knew that beginning was going to be tough. And I think if you're only human, if that doesn't affect you in some way, that you're home away to Ulster, then you're away in South Africa, then you're away in Thomond. Like, yes, and we got that win. But I think that at the time that was more where Munster were than where Connacht were, Like, and we pulled
I'll just jump in. That was in the sports ground. That was the first game back in the sports ground against Munster, and then Leinster was the other game.
That's the one. Sorry, yeah, you're right. And and it was one of those weird things where in the league we were kind of stuttering. In Europe we're playing well, and it was hard to make, because we still, after that first block, our performances kind of normalized. The intensity was rising all the time, all those nice markers of indicators of where the team are going. But at the big problem is the mistakes that lead to 7 points by the end of the season, because, like Stephen said, we're beating teams that we're expected to beat, but it's not that we're beating them. It was very professional. It wasn't like a tough win. It's like, oh yeah, we just dispatched teams, and that's kind of the performance that we're now expecting going forward. That's the base level for that squad, and that base level has actually risen year on year of what is now expected. So after a tough start, it was a much better end, and I think that's all you can really hope for, because even themselves, they said that they knew stuff they were doing at the beginning of the season wasn't working, and they've changed how they're playing. Andy Friend said it there before the Stormers match. They changed what they were doing because they tried something new, it didn't work, and then they changed again, all in one season.
And it is like, it's the point that's being made about Munster this week, having got to the final, is they wanted to try something. It wasn't working. They stuck with it, and it worked. And that is a big thing for a coaching ticket. And I looked into it there. So before the show, like, from round 3 on to round 18, the only teams that beat them were the fellow provinces, once each, I think, or twice for Leinster and Glasgow. Now, granted, they fell to 5 Interpro losses, but as you said, they're beating teams they're expected to beat. They didn't lose any home games. They're Leinster at home and Ulster at home, and even at that was a kick of a ball. Like, it's not a massive loss or anything like that. Like, Leinster is a different kettle of fish, as we know. So, just because I just want to focus on that point. So they lost 5 Interpro games this season. Granted, they won the one game that probably mattered most, and that was the game up in Ravenhill, and I should throw that in. But do you feel, and I'll come to you for this one, Bart, do you feel there's a clear step that Connacht need to take to bridge that gap? Or is it just a case of a lot of one-score games? There's really nothing between the provinces at the moment, and that Irish rugby is just very healthy.
I think you're right. There's very, very little between the provinces, especially their top level performances. But if Connacht want to make that next step, it's all about the mental skill side of the game, the mistake side of the game. So I think by the end of the year, the game plan was fairly solid. What has let Connacht down is individual players making individual mistakes in what are relatively good performances. So someone could be onto a 10 out of 10, but will drop a ball in front of the line, or go for a kick and it'll go out the full, or those little things that just kill momentum. And we're a demon for momentum killer mistakes. Sometimes we compound them more often than not. And it's that side of it. I think that's a mental skill side of the game. I think that's a sports psychologist side of the game. And that's the big leap. What needs to happen next? I think fresh voices in the coaching room will help with that, especially the likes of Fardy. I think he's been there, done that on the pitch. So hopefully he can bring that from a coaching perspective. And if they get someone in the backroom team in some level that will work on those mental skills, I think that's the big leap we need to make as a province to be more competitive and to put those type of tight games away.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to throw this one to you, Stephen, because I had a list of you anyway. But Brian Quinn on Twitter asked, is there a need for a mental skills coach or a skills coach at Connacht? Park has underlined the reasons there. Would you go along with it, what he said?
Yeah, in terms of like sports psychology, is it?
I can only assume that's what.
Absolutely. I can't see how any sort of professional team doesn't have it. From what I've heard from people who have messaged me on Twitter and stuff like that, I think there's one available to players in Connacht. Now, this could be incorrect, but it's not mandatory. I would change that. I think it has to be mandatory in the same way that you work on your physical skills in terms of keeping and looking after your body and looking after the food that you put into your system. You have to be looking at the mental side of the game. I find sports psychology kind of fascinating. I play golf, and it's a huge part of golf. You know, there's a really famous Bob Rutella, who's a famous sports psychologist, and he looks after some of the best golfers in the world. He also works with LeBron James. If LeBron James is looking at sports psychology, who is the most naturally gifted, freakish athlete in the world, who, if anyone could get away with not being mentally sharp, it's probably LeBron James. If he's doing that, then yeah, maybe some of the Connacht lads need to look into it too. And it's not just because obviously the advantages that it gives you. There's so many benefits to it. It takes some of the stress away. Like being a professional athlete is stressful. Like you have a lot of pressure coming on you from within, a lot of pressure from your coaching staff, from fans, from other players. That's stressful. Like being able to handle that and bring out the confidence within yourself. And a lot of golfers say it takes away a lot of the decision making for them, just so like they know what the plan is, and if things don't go to plan, they adjust. And I don't see how a professional team doesn't have it. Now, I looked at a couple of the other teams. Leinster doesn't have a psychologist listed in their backroom staff. I'd be shocked if they don't have it. I'm sure the Irish national team have it. Andy Farrell seems very, very in tune with the sports psychology side of things.
They bring one in every now and again.
It's Gary Keegan, isn't it?
Yeah, Keegan.
I think.
So I think you have to. I think it's a resource that you have to tap into, especially with Connacht, as Pádraig said, the small errors that get compounded. We saw it at the weekend with the Stormers. Ralston scores, we're back in the game. Tom Daly knocks on the ball and they don't jump on the ball. They just let it bounce because they don't want to give away a penalty. And then the Stormers player just picks it up and scores. Like, just jump on the ball, take the penalty. Like, it's small mental errors that for some reason Connacht seem to get absolutely punished by every time. So yeah, I think you need to get a sports psychologist in 100%.
Do you think, I'm not going to point fingers, because do you think some of that is at a coaching level? Is it at a player's level or a leadership level? Or is it just we get in a coach like that and that'll help round things out? Because there is going to be people listening at home and they hear the mental skills and they'll roll their eyes and they'll say, that's on coaches or that's on leaders. But what's your take on that? Because I have no idea what goes on in the professional environment. I'm not saying you do, but what do you think?
It's all based on individual skill set. You know, I think because Andy went into the director of rugby role, he was kind of doing that more hands-on with the players, you know, how are things going on type of thing. I know Jack has spoken openly about going to sports psychologist himself outside of the Connacht environment. I've heard that as well, that there's someone in there that's available. It's every single coach brings something different to the table. And if it is a piece of the puzzle that you can't do as a coach, then you bring someone in for it. That's why Keegan's in the RFU. Like Andy Farrell is renowned for his man management, but that external voice where you can go and say Andy Farrell's a prick, it is sometimes needed. But so that person then come back to Farrell in a roundabout way and go, all right, this is what you need to work on in this aspect. It's all circular. If there's someone in there doing that, that's brilliant. If there isn't, it's a voice that needs to kind of come in. I feel it's been needed for the last couple of years. And I'd heard there's someone there as well that they can go talk to. But I think is if they're not part of the plan and it's just an additional resource, then it's not helping the plan.
That's fair. And actually, thankfully, you mentioned Jack Carty, because the very first podcast on this channel is an interview with myself and Jack, and he does mention that. So I'm just going to plug that in. Thank you very much, Pádraig, for the shameless plug. So we spoke about this, myself and yourself, Pádraig, before, but as on the week we record, there is a home Fighting Cup final and Challenge Cup final in Dublin in the Aviva Stadium this weekend, and this is something the Connacht listed as a big goal, both players and coaching staff. Now this is a URC series, but we will touch on Europe because it's a huge part in Irish rugby. Looking at the whole campaign, Pádraig, do you think that firstly did Connacht let one slip? Considering like it was a sighted aim, like even in my own Fanview preview, like people were saying this was like, let's just go for this. Or do you think the fact they made a URC semi-final, going on the late run that they did, I'm not trying to make excuses or anything, you can have 2 goals, that's possible. Do you think that kind of eases it a small bit? Because that's a pretty historic season for Connacht, 6 wins in their own and the URC semi-final.
It's one of those things where one thing does almost negate the other. You know, we make the URC semi-final, not beating Newcastle that day, not getting the home run to a possible Challenge Cup suddenly isn't as big a deal. That's because we made the semi-final. Whereas if we don't make that semi-final, if that match in Ulster goes the way people think it is, then suddenly that Challenge Cup is something that we have let slip. I think Connacht were right to rotate the players throughout the Challenge Cup as they did. They were given performances, and you've got to back performances. It goes back to building that squad depth. And if you're not willing to back guys who are making big plays, then why are they in your team? And there are guys making big plays, so that's why they went to play. On that night in Newcastle, it didn't go right for them. I think we played the best Benetton that we played against Benetton team that played their best performance in, I'd say, at least 3 years. And they were there on a day, and that's what we got caught on. That just happens, you know. Sometimes, like that day in Benetton, we got beat by a better team. You know, that was that slip in Newcastle when the team didn't perform to their own ability. And I think they almost had it in the head after beating Newcastle, given the situation they're in, that the team weren't quite as, I don't know, I'm not in the squad, but it didn't feel like the focus was quite right at times. And then we started chasing the game, and once you're chasing, you're almost always lost. It's one of those things, because, like I said, because we got to the URC semi-final and we performed as well as we did it in the lead up to it, I think we can go, this was a good season for Connacht overall. But if we don't make that game, suddenly it isn't. And that's just sport. That's the nature of a league. You know, one win can make a season good or bad.
Yeah, and you talk about, you know, take a shot when you hear me say this on this podcast, but you talk about fine margins. And Connacht in that Newcastle game, I remember distinctly, they had a chance, I think it was to level the game. Keelan Blade scored a try, passed it slightly forward. It's not obvious it goes to TMO, it's not given. They end up coming up short. That would have been a 4th try as well, and that would have given them a home quarter final.
Yeah,
like that's the small bit that you're looking at. And even that Benetton game, like as he said, you probably played the best Benetton performance in a long, long time. Stephen, do you want to take a shot? What do you think of the Challenge Cup campaign as a whole? And could you even say, like, given the fact that they blooded young players, like I know John Porch is the exception to the rule, he played all bar one game for Connacht this season, but you look at, say, the likes of Darren Murray, Oisin McCormack, or McNulty, Dean McClellan, they all got valuable minutes in this tournament. And for Pete Wilkins next year, who we have to remember, he was in that coaching group this season as well, and he's going to be there next season, and he might need to call on these players. Was maybe that rotation just you die by your sword that you want to play with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I agree with Pádraig. I think they were right to rotate that game. Look, this is the boring part of blooding young players, is you don't really see the benefit for another year or two. And especially in those games, we saw it last year. When we had injuries, the likes of Jordan Duggan playing in massive group games in the Champions Cup, and same with Jack Ainger, and like that stands to players in a year's time. It might not work great in the moment, but look, you have to look down the road as well. It's not just a case of this game is the only thing that matters. We need to look ahead too, and especially with Connacht's squad, I think it was the right call personally. Look, it was disappointing that they didn't go on a more of a run, absolutely. But look, as you said, sports is fickle. Benetton absolutely exploited us. I think our defensive system, we like to kind of be pretty narrow, and if you can beat us on the outside, there's space there. Benetton found space over and over again, and they were by far the better team on the day. Is it a disappointment? No. At the end of the day, you have to be kind of realistic about what Connacht are. I think we might get into it later on, but I think this was pretty much as good of a season, maybe bar the semi-final of the Challenge Cup, potentially a final that Connacht could have had. I think it was a fantastic season. Again, being logical of what Connacht are, I think, it was a brilliant season.
And it's probably worth pointing out, because it only just came to me now and not when I was writing the notes, and one of you might remember. But am I right in saying that Connacht were unlikely to make top two around the time the team was named, and then Bristol lost points at that weekend, or they were in a hearing during the week and then lost points and then slipped down? Am I right in saying that they kind of overlap? So like, you can't just say one thing on Monday and then change your mind on Friday because something else happens.
Yeah, so literally, I think Bristol got docked points for having a eligible player, and that kind of brought Connacht into we could have ended up second seed conversation that we weren't in on the Monday. It became very weird very fast, and instead of just needing to win, the permutations came in, and suddenly everyone's watching results. And I think Andy Friend talked about trying to keep everyone off that type of vibe of what do we need, but guys have phones, guys have their own way of getting into games, guys hear things, they get text messages, whatever. You can't stop that. You can try and stop the noise as much as possible, but all it takes is your focus being off by 1%, and suddenly you're not quite in the game. You're not training, you're not trying any less, you're not like trying any less or anything like that. It's just your focus just quite isn't there. Like, great, it's great for me when that happens to work. There's only one other person in the room with me, not a couple of thousand people watching. Yeah,
and that's fair. And one man who, because I know I didn't have this written down, but just because we're on about that Newcastle game for a few minutes, one man who really performed that day was Finlay Bealham, and he went on and had a brilliant Six Nations for Ireland, as did Matt Hansen and Bundy as well. Do you think now, like, obviously Connacht have made gradual progression over the last couple of years since, say, you could say the last decade, year on year. Do you think, like, having lads like Finlay Bealham, who are not only playing for Ireland, playing big games for Ireland, Bundy as well, Mac is one of the best players in the world this season and last season as well. Do you think that helps? And this isn't related to Newcastle, it just helped me think of it. But do you think that helps in terms of the progression that Connacht are going on? Like, they lose to Newcastle, but they bounce back and they beat, I think it was the Sharks at home, pretty convincingly. That they're brilliant that night, and they go on this brilliant run. Do you think that is just one of the things that comes with, you play better, you get more players in the international team, and then these lads drive you on for more?
Yeah, 100%. I think for a while it was kind of just Bundy who had that kind of experience coming in, and now having the likes of Finlay and Mac coming in only adds to that. Just on Mac alone, I was thinking this the other day, what I love about what Mac has done, I think a lot of Connacht's progression, well, obviously his hair and facial hair.
Yep.
You never know what you're going to get every week with Mac. But I think a lot of Connacht's progression this year, in a lot of ways, has to do with his attitude. Mac has come in and in a very positive way, doesn't really give a fuck. And I mean that in like the best way possible, because there's no mental baggage.
That's my headline right there. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Yeah, but like, there's no like, oh, I fear Leinster. Leinster really good. Mac doesn't give a shit about Leinster. Mac's coming from Australia. Mac probably hadn't even heard of Connacht up until about 2 or 3 years ago. I think he said that recently. He's like, I didn't really hear them. Like, so he's not coming in here. Even the Six Nations, he's like, oh yeah, cool. Like, this is just another rugby game for me. I'm going to go in and guess what? I'm going to try my best, but if it doesn't come off, I'll try again. I think that has translated to Connacht a little bit. And Finley's a bit like that. Finley's very much a free spirit, and he comes in, like those lads will give it their all in a game day, and they'll do their best to win. But I don't feel like they let it get to them if they lose. Like Mac will just get back up and go again. And I think that's translated to the rest of the players a little bit, to have a go and look, we're going to give it our best. When we click, we're fecking good. And if we don't, we'll just get back on the horse and go again. I think that has translated to Connacht's kind of progression a little bit too.
As Ted Lasso would say, they're both goldfish. You know, it's like
100%.
You know, like, and that's what I like about them. They play with an intensity, but when something happens, it hasn't happened. Like, it's straight away. It's like, all right, next job, off we go. And it's having guys playing at that level is what's bringing Connacht along this year. I think if you look at Niall Murray, he's playing at that level. If he builds his engine and becomes an 80-minute guy, I think he is going to be in discussions for Ireland team going forward if he's not already. But it's just that side of it, like they're leading by example. What Connacht need in that sense is leaders in leaders, you know, those kind of more vocal guys who are going to drive the standards, because these guys are just going to go and do their job incredibly well, and you've got to match them, and they bring you along that way. They also need the guys like Jack who drive standards week in, week out, day in, day out on the training field, and more guys are getting there, I think, and that's the big thing for the team.
Yeah, and because you brought up Niall Murray as well, I am obliged, because of a conversation I had midweek about him and his brilliant form, I'm obliged to say Niall Murray should be in the Ireland conversation. And I'm not saying this simply because someone said no one mentions him, but it is some of the reason. But he has been absolutely brilliant for Connacht this season. And I will, you know, it's not just jokes. It's like I'm making this jokes because he's listening, but it is true. He is definitely one of those. And you look at even, you know, you look at Conor Oliver, good player at Munster, has pushed on to another level and so on. And this is a running team. And when you have players like that who are in that bracket of, you know, good players starting to realize their potential, great things can happen. And I think that's what kind of happened with Connacht this season. And listen, we all remember, even if it was pretty ad nauseum at one stage, the URC Statmaster saying that Connacht had a 17% chance of making the playoffs. Don't get me wrong, it's just maths, but God, guys, you could have laid off not sharing it for 1 week when you went on that run. But you had less of a chance than Edinburgh, Cardiff, Lions, Benetton, and Ospreys. And I'm pretty sure you bet 3 of those in your last 6 games, 3 if not 4. And like in true Connacht fashion, the fight wasn't over at any stage. It wasn't over in January. You won those 6 straight. You got 7th. But in this, going back to the preseason articles again, one Connacht fan claimed that they had to prove to themselves and to others that they can be consistent. And it was starting to grow at that stage. Upon reflection, lads, we'll go to you first, Stephen. Do you think that this historic run was the true sign of what Connacht should do and did prove to themselves that they can be a consistent team and a contender?
Absolutely, yeah. Like we were saying on my podcast as well, like coming in February, like there was a chance to go on the run, but you know, talking about going on a run and actually going on a run are 2 very different things. And Connacht actually went on that run and they built, you know, week in, week out. And it was actually during the Six Nations, it was, you know, there was 2 weeks off here, a week off here. It was by no means like, you know, a consistent run of games, like week in, week out. And that's even tougher to do. And we all know how talented Connacht can be. And on their day, they can beat anybody. We've seen that. But as we've said before, there's also the days where they just don't show up. We saw that in the first half of the season a little bit. We've seen it last year too many times, and we didn't see that towards the end of the season. As you said, we were actually kind of dispatching teams pretty comfortably, bar maybe the Ulster the quarterfinal, where, you know, we probably should have been 20 points ahead and out of sight. You know, Connacht like to make it a bit more exciting than that. But yeah, was this kind of, you know, again, looking at realistically, I think maybe 6th would have been the highest we could have gotten the URC and look back and be like, okay, that's actually fair. I think every team above us are better teams than Connacht, are better squads, but they're also bigger teams. They're more funded teams. They're, you know, much more deeper squads than Connacht. So I think 6th, 7th is kind of the highest we could have got this year, and we achieved that, which is fantastic. You know, last year we finished 11th, 12th, I think, in the league.
11th, I think.
11th in the league, yeah. And like we never really had a run at the top 8 at all. So to be actually finishing 7th this year with nearly 6th, probably we were better off finishing 7th than 6th in hindsight. If next year, could we finish 5th? Absolutely. Could we also finish 10th? I mean, that's not impossible either. Like this is the thing, we don't know yet with Connacht. So was it the best we could have done this year? I think absolutely. Credit has to go to the players and coaching staff. The question is now, how do we follow up a good year? Do we follow up with an even better year? I think we all agree here. I'm sure Pádraig would say top 8 now is what we expect. Will we get that? I don't know, but that should be the aim now going forward every year to progress that up and, again, maybe get to a URC final. Who knows?
I think what this season showed in the URC is that 50 points is roughly top 8. And that's kind of, you need to win 10 games. And what Connacht did this year over last year is we won that extra game, but we were getting bonus points a lot more. The lack of bonus points last year was a killer. And because we only lost one game more than the person who came 8th. Like that's how tight it was. And it was pretty much the same as tight this year again. And it's winning your home games is very important. And us going on that run and winning those home games and win the games we should have won is what made us get to that point. What's happened over the last couple of years, and this year I showed it towards the end of this year, showed more. It's our base level and our highs are a lot closer than before because our lows used to be a lot lower than our lows now. So as long as that low keeps coming up, we can start competing on a more consistent basis and getting into that top 8. Because if you think about it, the top 8 is the best team in Scotland, 4 of the Irish teams, and 3 of the best teams in South Africa. So if one day by miracle the Welsh teams get themselves sorted, that's an extra spot or 2 that has to go from that group of 8. If you think about it, just you would think they can get into that position with, good coaching or something. So we're in a tough league. We're not always going to be a top 8, but I think we have the tools to compete to be in the top 8 on a constant basis.
Yeah, and dare I say it is the best league. But listen, from an outsider point of view, and this is important to balance both sides of it as well. Like this was an incredible run that Connacht went on. Like you can even look at that Glasgow game. No one beat Glasgow in Glasgow. Okay, Munster did it eventually, but no one came close to beating them until Connacht really rattled them. They really should have won that. Like there was probably a wrong penalty call in a maul in the last play of the game away from possibly beating them. And like that's so much even. Like we're not going to talk about referees because there's been so much of that this weekend. I'm actually fed up with it at this stage.
It is a shit conversation to have, isn't it?
Oh, it's boring.
With how good the rugby's been, if you're talking about refs, good luck. Just talk about the rugby. And my whole thing, I have my inner anti-ref talk is if you're talking about one ref decision cost you a game, you didn't do enough to win a game. You've got to be. It can't be one call. You can be frustrated about things, yeah, but if you're hanging it all on one call, good luck, goodbye, good night. Don't be talking to me.
Yeah, no, that's it. But listen, Connacht did go on this run, and then by the time they came to Glasgow, they were literally that close away. And yeah, we're not going to talk about referees, but listen, another day they get that call. Maybe they don't even score from it anyway. Maybe they don't come close. But that probably, I'm not going to say give them confidence because they did lose, but there was definitely an element going into that Ulster game that, lads, we can do something here. Like we can really rattle them. And they didn't just rattle, like they physically hurt them. Like the likes of Cian Prendergast looked at Dwayne Vermeulen, a World Cup winner, the vice captain of that South African team, and said, I have you. Like that's the level that Connacht got to in that game. And granted, a lot of players didn't have their best game down in Cape Town, but that happens. It's a week travel. It's, you're losing a day, you're losing training, it's a different schedule or whatever. But I don't know, maybe it was one maybe it was someone else said that probably wasn't Connacht's best performance of the year, but it was their best result up in Ravenhill. Taking those 2 games just as a microcosm of the season, like I'm trying to think of the best way to word this now. Do you think that will give Connacht not just a bit of confidence going into next season, but do you think that is, again, like we said before, that's where their mentality is? We can go and we can get a result, or we can at least die on our sword.
I think Andy Friend said it best after the Stormers match, to be honest. Is like Connacht are at a place now where pats on the back for good performances are just not what we're about. Um, and the new coach team going to take over. They're going to look at next year. And it's like, look, lads, do you want pats in the back for good performances, or do you want to start putting these games away? And it's actually going to be a boost for next year. Like that Ulster match was incredible. Most convincing 15-10 win you'll ever see in your life. It should have been out of sight at halftime.
Doing it the hard way as always.
It's not even the hard way. It's just, it was a first time in a quarterfinal in a long time. It's a big game. People make, that's the extra 2%, and we had a game plan that completely ran Ulster ragged. Ulster have one way of playing towards the end of the season, and we had them figured out. Simple as. You can't make mistakes against Stormers. Munster will find that out in 2 weeks' time. It's just the way life is. Good performances ish, things to work on. Yeah, great stuff for the coaches to use next season.
Yeah, and
just on that, just you mentioned winning these games will help next year. I think absolutely it does. And my theory on this is, look, you can say that you're good enough to beat a team, but until you actually do it, it's very, very tough to convince yourself that you are. And I think the biggest example of that is Ireland beating the All Blacks in Ireland in November and then going down there the following year and beating them in a series. I don't think that series win happens apart from that, unless that win that November beforehand happens. Do you know what I mean? Because again, you can tell yourself over and over that we can do this. Until you do it, it's just not there. So that quarterfinal winning a big quarterfinal away from home against Ulster, that has to stand to the lads come next season, again, just for purely confidence.
Yeah. And I might, next season, it's not really something we talk about with Ulster, but they're in a more precarious situation. And that was in the last pod. But for Connacht, we know what's happening. We know their coaches. We know the signings. We know the story with basically everything. Like they've made a continuity appointment in Pete Wilkins. Now, continuity appointments can go really, really right or can go really wrong. We hope it goes well for him. What do you think he will take away, firstly, from those closing weeks, again, going back on that, from, say, January on? And what do you think he can take away just in general going into next season that he could be thinking, I suppose, here's how we get to the next level, or here's what we're going to build on. This is our, I'm not going to say a base level performance because his first few games is going to be without some key players, but where is he going to say this is where we're starting from, or this the minimum, or how do you think he addressed things in August? We'll go to you, Pádraig.
It's tough to know because he's gonna have a squad that he knows pretty well. I'd say he's almost individually picked a lot of the players that he's coming in. So he won't have that time of figuring out, is this my team? What's my team going to do? He'll have a plan. I think they've figured out ways they want to play. I think they're going to continue a lot of them by looks of things. And with the appointments they have in Faraday, Muldoon and Mark Sexton, I think there's enough fresh voices there to make what we're doing, to improve on what we're doing. So I don't know. It's hard to say what he's going to do because I like Pete. I like listening to him talk. I think he's a very smart guy. He's got that likable nature about him that you kind of want to just let him talk. But if you watch the Connacht documentary, he's also a hard ass in training. One of my favorite lines is this: you can sunbathe all you want when you retire. Get training when you're free. It's that type of stuff. He's got a winning mentality. I think he'll want to push Connacht on, and I don't think he'll care how he does it.
Yeah, and we'll come to you, Stephen. What do you think he'll go from next season?
I think he'll bring a lot of confidence. I think totally agree. He's very well spoken. He, the few players we've spoken to couldn't have spoke more highly of him, and the rest of the coaching ticket. I think he'll take confidence from the fact that some big names have signed for Connacht, and they've signed knowing that he'll be the coach. I'm sure they've came and spoke to him. They've obviously believed in his kind of his plan and his future for the club. Then continue to sign for the club, especially with, I'm sure they could have got a bigger paycheck somewhere else, and chances are, but they chose to come to Connacht. They believe in what Wilkins can do. I think he'll hit the ground running. I think he's a real kind of innovator in terms of the way he thinks about rugby. I'm excited to see. Again, we don't know how much of this year was is it purely Wilkins? Because look, a friend still signed off on everything that was decided on. So we don't know. He could be way more expansive as an attack next year. That Friendly isn't there. He could be less expansive. We don't know yet. I'd like to see them be a bit more expansive, a bit more. I think we ranked very low on offloads this year. I think that would have really helped us a little bit, especially against Stormers, when we couldn't physically beat them. But I'm excited. I think he'll hit the ground running.
One of the lowest in 22 entries that I see today, something like that. So like there's things to work on straight away. And we just touching the work ons. We'll get back to we've touched on Pete Wilkins here, so we'll get back to the main coaching ticket, but we'll go to work ons. And one of the listener questions came in from Aina and from Brian, and they both looked at that. Like, what are their work ons for next season? Like, they want to push to the next level. Where do you see it coming from? Like Aina suggested, maybe restarts. I know if we had this conversation this time last year, we would have said them all, and that completely turned around and went up another few levels. So where do you see it going next year? Where would you like to see it go in terms of where would you like to see them advance their game? Go to Park.
I think add another dimension to their overall attacking play. I think we're too reliant on strike plays. I think once we get into that phase 5, 6, 7, if we haven't broken the line, we've been a kick heavy team. I think we need to just mix that up a small bit more, especially around the halfway line. Small things like, if we're gonna take tap and goals, make sure we at least get the first phase. Too many times we just knocked on a try line. I'm like, that's just not good enough. Like, that's just a simple thing. If anyone's noticed, watch Dave Heffernan do tap and goals. He picks the ball up like a GA player. He scoops it up. It's one of the fun best things I noticed a couple of years ago, and I think it's class. And yeah, the restarts I think have been a bit better but I think restarts are more of a mental skills thing, like just being switched on to get the ball and execute the exit. I think there's too much time we just don't make a decision. What are we doing, right or wrong? If you actually commit to a decision once you've made it, it saves you the 5 second, the half a second deciding what it has cost you. So it's stuff like that. But it really is small stuff. I think it's giving better minutes to people coming in. So if they have to start, they're ready to go. I think there's a bit too much of the 5-10s. Let's get people playing for 20, 25. But it's really is small stuff I think Connacht are working on now. I think a new assistant attack coach will help a lot of what we're doing, especially going forward. Mark Sexton, I think if you looked at the under-20s this year, some of their attack was incredible. I think he's going to bring back some of that attack from anywhere flair that we had under Lamb. But that married with our kicking game, I think is going to be a good mix going forward.
Yeah, we'll just go to the coaching ticket now, because obviously Mark Sexton's been mentioned. We've name checked them all at some stage in the podcast. Stephen, what do you make of the ticket as a whole, and what they bring individually? And for people who don't know, maybe just talk us through who they have and what jobs, in case there are people who would like a refresher.
Yeah, so obviously Pete Wilkins will remain as head coach. Then they have obviously Collie Tucker will remain on. I believe he's in charge of scrums. Muldoon has come in. I think he's taken over from Deval Senecal. Correct me if I'm wrong.
In effect, yeah.
So line outs and mauls. Fardy's come in. I assume he'll be defense coach. And then Mark Sexton has come in as kind of assistant attack coach, who will work with Pete Wilkins, I believe. Again, I could be open to a correction there, but yeah, look, it's again kind of similar to how we go about signing players. Maybe not the most proven track records, but bags of potential and bags of potential talent. Obviously Muldoon coming back doesn't need a whole pile of explanation what he means to the club, and even just the atmosphere he'll bring when he is there, especially at home games. But again, does he have the best coaching record? No, he doesn't. He's only had, I think, one job over at Bristol, and it wasn't exactly hugely successful either. But it's almost like who cares at this point? Kind of like, let's bring him in and see what he can do back in Connacht. Scott Fardy again has very, very limited coaching experience, but what I like, and same with Mark Sexton, what I like what Pete Wilkins has done, he surrounded himself with winners, with guys who know what it takes to win and do it at a professional level. Like Scott Fardy just made a career out of winning with Leinster, just knew how to get the job done and did it. Muldoon the same with Connacht. Sexton's coming in from that very successful under 20s kind of squad, and has that competitive genes in him from his brother, and a fantastic hairline alongside his brother as well. It's also another part of the genes. Look, yeah, again, it's hugely a huge potential among this Connacht squad, coaching staff, should I say. My worry is, you kind of touched on already, how amazing our maul and lineout has been this year, and that's been all down to the work of Deval Senecal. I'd like to see that continue, at least, if not being improved on. If that takes a step back, that will obviously be a massive shame. I hope it doesn't. But yeah, like, he surrounded himself with guys who knows what it takes to win at the highest level. They're not very used to losing, and I think that can only be a good thing.
I think what Scott Fardy is going to bring is what DeWalt said to the team very early on the season. He pretty much told the pack they were soft. Like, imagine your coach telling you you're soft. Like, Dave Heffern's come out and said this. You know what I mean? Like, he says, and Connacht were, I think
he wasn't wrong.
Connacht were a nice rugby team. Does that make sense? Connacht are a nice rugby team, nice to watch, nice to play against. This year, we've not been a nice rugby team. We've been physical, we've been tough, and that's just down to mental attitude at times. You know, you don't have to be the biggest guy. It's not about the size of the dog, it's about the size of the fight in the dog, you know? And I think that's what kind of he brought mainly. I think Scott Fardy will hopefully fill that void, because I think if Muldoon lets his emotion pour in to his coach into Connacht, it could be mayhem, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's fair. And we'll stick with you, Pádraig, for the final question of the evening. We'll come back to you this evening as well. But just going through the players that Connacht have signed, some of the lads that are departing, like it is quite a revolving door this season, unfortunately, and it reflects the game as a whole and the directive the RFU want to go towards, with less games being played. But you want to just give us an overview of those players coming in and out, and then maybe finish up on guys you want to see come good next season, be it younger guys or even other players you want to see push on to greater heights?
So, like, I think the guys leaving there's a ton going. I think the headlines of Kieran Marmie and Shane Delahunt and Alex Wooten will like take most of the chat, but you know, Leva played great stuff for us when he was here. Fitzgerald is always given 110%. Masterson, Kieran Booth, and Adam Byrne, you know, these guys all gave to the jersey and on their day could add it to performances. It's just the nature of the beast that they had to go. Like, I think Kieran Marmion's going to be a big loss. He has that innate ability to not fuck around and find out, if that makes sense, at the back of a maul and the back of a ruck. Like, if that ball isn't anyway in any danger, it's gone. It doesn't live there. And that's the one thing I think we're really going to miss from him. But when you see what's coming in, I think obviously Santiago Cordero is going to like really take the headlines. A exciting back three player. Not that we have any of them really ever in our team. You know, I'm tempted to like get a t-shirt line made up going, you can't spell Connacht without pasty outside backs. Just I think it'd be a hot seller down in Munster anyway, who likes slagging us.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Wait until the end to knock me. At least we're in the final. Anyway,
the sevens lads coming in, I think they're smart. I was watching the sevens over the weekend. I think the two boys are going to be really good additions to the squad. They're really nice. I think with all those outside backs being brought in, people forgot that Joe Joyce was like tagged last year as coming in from Bristol. I think that's a smart signing with Sean Jansen and Sean O'Brien. Like, big guys are entering that pack, you know, and I think lots of different experience coming in as players from different environments is really, really good to see. Declan Moore and Michael McDonald, yes, they're a bit going to be squad players, but I think for me in those positions, there's talent in those guys that we think are going to be good. Like the Butler, I think is going to come good. Dylan Tina Martin will be an international. He will get international caps. You can see it in him. He's got that dog in him. Sam Elo is a guy that I think is really going to push on next season. So I think we're at a point where the young guys are ready to take that step up. The guys coming in are going to add to the strength and depth, and especially bulk up the pack. And hopefully those back three guys will play into what Wilkins wants to do, because they definitely have the pace to play fast. So hopefully they can they acclimatize to 15s as quickly as possible. And I can't wait to see Santiago in a green jersey, because that's going to be great crack.
That will be something, all right. Like, to think, like, even Ireland signing Argentinian international isn't really something that we've seen too much of. Is there any? I might just throw this to you, actually, Stephen. Is there any players currently there that you want to see push on, or players who are going well, maybe push towards international, or even the younger players? Because to be fair to Connacht, it's been, they kind of have that golden generation of about 10 years ago, Carty, Buckley, Marmy, and all those guys. It's been a bit slower since, but they've had key players involved in the very successful under-20s in recent years. So, is there anyone you're looking forward to seeing in green next season?
Yeah, there's three lads I definitely want to highlight. So starting off with Diarmuid Kilgallen, he's still only so young, but I don't think he's had a bad game yet for Connacht. I can't remember. Actually, I have it up here. I'll tell you now. I can't. Sorry, I don't want to look for it, but I don't think he doesn't have that many caps. But every time he plays, he seems to either score a try, or he just seems to be, man the match contender. He's absolutely fantastic. Seems to be an absolute sick athlete. And only will get better. And when Mac's away in international duty, it's great to have him there to kind of slot in fairly seamlessly. And I get very excited when I think about what he potentially could be. Another one is Cottle Ford. Again, just because we don't really know what we have with him. He's a big boy, and he can play 12, can play 10. Is he Jack's successor? Is he going to be an out and out 12? We don't really know what the plan is for him yet. But he had a big finish of the season. And he's a big ball carrying kind of 12 if he wants to be. So I'm excited again. He's only played 13 times. The sky's the limit for him. And lastly, a player who I think will need to have a big year is Colin Riley. Obviously, as Pádraig said, with Marmion leaving, Colin Riley's going to get a lot more caps next season. And where Connacht fans were absolutely blessed this year that when Blade was coming off, we'd have Kieran Marmion to come on. There's going to be a bit more of a gap there with Colin Riley. I really like Colin Riley. I think he is, as Pádraig was saying, he's absolutely he's got that dog in him. He doesn't give a fuck who you are. He's going to absolutely fight you if necessary. And he seems to be a very skilled scrum half. So, I think kind of Connacht fans will have to be a bit, patient with him. It's not going to be Kieran Marmion coming on. It's going to be Colin Riley. He's only a young lad, 17 caps. But I think he has the potential to become a really, really good scrum half. And more game time next season will only contribute to that. So there are three kind of guys I wanted to highlight of maybe the younger generation.
What I like about him is he has that thing of he gets the ball away from the ruck ASAP. And I think that's something that, when especially coming on as a sub, really does help with tempo. It's the other side of it. Can he slow a game down? Can he control that side? I'm looking forward to see him. I think he's great. I think that young Connacht contingent that came through the academy, like Jennings is another name that's coming through. It's we're in fine health in that young side of things. It's great. It really is great to see.
Yeah.
Sorry, as well, we have to mention Seamus Harry Langton. How can we not mention Seamus Harry Langton?
Yeah. Like
record worlds.
We don't need speedy outside backs.
Yeah, we can't believe he's not Irish playing
actually,
for us.
On all the sevens, sorry, and this is just a tangent, but there has to be a plan with all these sevens. Wilkins, it's not like Wilkins just like, oh, another sevens player, I'll take him. Like there has to be a plan here, right? That maybe some of them will turn to 12s, 13s, 10s, maybe. I'm assuming that's
good general fast ball playing backs, and what you do is you bring them in, especially those two guys, and they don't have to start straight away. You have, like you said, you have Kilgannon, you have Jennings setting up, you have Porch who'll be there all the time, you have Tiernan Hannon who'll be there all the time. So your backline is fine for starters, but these guys are super 23s for their first couple of caps. Find out where they live. Like Brian Ralston's still there, like where these
Shane
guys.
Bolton, you haven't mentioned, he's only played once this season, I think.
Yeah, and if he comes good,
why are we not playing him more? I don't get it. He's a freak.
He's not been injured, no?
He's been injured in top half of the season. And then when he was coming back, Call Ford started playing really well. The problem is like when you have guys of an equal standard, one guy just being fit at the right time just kills your chance. Like it's not that he's played badly. It's just because even for Galwegians, he's scoring tries. He's playing well.
In fairness to Ford, and I'm not trying to make a headline here, but I actually think Connacht played their best rugby of the season with Ford or Hawkshaw at 12 rather than Bundy. And listen, not slating Bundy, like not a fear of it. Too afraid to do that anyway. But like, I think that their style of play, it has been their best.
You can
with
slate
those
him,
boys.
just don't steal Robbie's laptop. That's all.
And don't steal chicken on the streets of Auckland. That's all.
Yeah. Just as a good general rule of thumb for life. Yeah, don't do that.
Don't steal around Bundy.
Yeah.
But it's actually funny you mentioned Shane Jennings and Colin Riley as well, because I actually went to school with those two boys. So it's good to see the Garbly lads pushing through, having won, I think it was 3 senior cups in a row.
And he's a Munster supporter, lads. A Munster supporter.
I know. I'm a very confused individual, really.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
I know. Listen, you can't say much. But no, lads, this has been good fun now, to be fair. And I think we'll leave it at that. So thanks very much, Pádraig and Stephen, for your contributions. And we'll definitely catch up next season, and with the World Cup coming up as well. And Stephen, I promise I'll give you a better intro next time around if that's what counts you come on. And thanks at home.
Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks at home to everyone for listening as well. So part 3 of this series will be recorded next week, and we're going to look back on the season of Leinster, who are hoping to claim European glory this weekend. And speaking of that big matchup in Dublin, I'm recording a bonus Heineken Champions Cup final podcast tomorrow, which will be available first thing Thursday. So just to whet the appetite before Dublin's first final in 10 years. So if you like what you see or like what you hear, please do subscribe. And you can find all the links for my channels down below. But for now, folks, take it easy. Slán na fóill.